Oh,
Yep.
so welcome to this evening's webinar. My name is Cian. I'm a jigsaw clinician and a clinical psychologist.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Laura. I'm a jigsaw clinician and an occupational therapist.
So we're here this evening to talk to you about young people's mental health and in particular about adjusting to change. And we've looked through quite a number of different changes that young people commonly experience that maybe can have a big impact on their mental health. So we're going to go through a few of those now.
Yeah. So some of the things that we commonly see in terms of change that young people will kind of come to jigsaw with generally are often moving from primary school to secondary school, and particularly around this time of year we would see that quite regularly for the 12-13-year-olds, and that transition and the change and the movement from often a small school and a very cohesive group of friends to a larger school, and all the emotions that come with that, and particularly now when we're faced with COVID and young people have been unable to finish school in the traditional way and are probably a lot more apprehensive about going to secondary school, because often in these times that young people are prepared to go into secondary school while in primary school in that preparation.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I guess it's not just young people. We're all dealing with massive changes at the moment. We've all had to adjust to huge changes in our lives, whether it's jobs or at home. But like you can see, for young people, some of the big things that are coming up for them, the young people that we've been talking to, are those cancellation of exams, not being able to get the kind of finishing ceremony that they'd have been used to. And now the prospect of going to college or having a summer where all their plans of holidays and that are kind of thrown out the window. So
yeah,
it's there.
It's a lot more challenging now, maybe with a lot more unknowns for everyone than maybe if it were last year or the year before, that people are trying to figure out.
Yeah, it feels like nothing is straightforward anymore.
No, certainly not. No.
Yeah.
And then added to that is we see the general adolescence and the bodily changes that go with that, and the hormonal changes too, along with facing all the different other changes as well.
Yeah, I think we were kind of trying to think through the big changes that young people and like adolescents in general bring to us. So there are those bodily changes, puberty, and big changes that they can't do anything about. And then there's the kind of very common ones that young people that have a negative impact on young people's mental health at times, and that's things like separating parents or endings in loss, bereavements, those kinds of things.
Yeah, and we were even thinking about the older young people too, and what changes they might see, or we often see come in to with us, might be changing jobs or maybe loss of jobs at the moment, or parents maybe are losing jobs, or there's been a change with all of that at home. So I anticipate that may come in more and more, but it's certainly a very real change.
Yeah, when you're really trying to look across the lifespan of adolescents have to deal with so many changes, and it's that kind of later period where they're dealing with moving house, moving to college, or getting a job or losing a job. So there's huge changes for young people all the time that they're, I guess, having to adjust to almost on a month by month basis, and how they adjust to that with their mental health, how they manage their mental health in that, or at times how those things can have a negative impact and their mental health can deteriorate as a result.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, so it's often that change brings challenges to young people's mental health, and we've been thinking about that when we're preparing for this, and how do we support young people with their mental health over this period, but over change in general, I suppose.
Exactly, and what we do a lot in Jigsaw is maybe at times not as much the practicals, although we'll get into that as well, obviously. But we try and bring meaning to changes for young people, and what meanings they might get from that, how that's changed their story, or what that now says to them about their identity or who they are as a person and that kind of thing. So yeah, so what we wanted to talk about this evening was this framework for understanding mental health for young people. And it was developed just 2 years ago by the British Psychological Society, and it's the Power Threat Meaning Framework. So I know that sounds like a bit of a mouthful, but really we're trying to break it down this evening and make it a bit more understandable as a way of looking at mental health in general. So it's been developed as a model of understanding mental health that's not medical. I think that's kind of one of the first components of it. Yeah, and so looking at mental health not in terms of diagnosis or disorders, but more that mental health is something that's affecting us all the time, and that's really comes to the fore, I think, with adjusting to change. I think when we were chatting about this beforehand, we were noting that some young people can get kind of given this label of adjustment disorder, or that changing or adjusting is somehow disordered. And but what we want to talk about this evening is actually how very understandable it is that young people would respond in the way that they do to change.
Yeah. So it's like often they get labeled maybe with the outward facing emotion, or they're angry, or they're bold, or they're acting out, or whatever, when there's a lot more texture often behind it. And to look at the full story, and through our conversations, the word story is kind of come in as to what led them to this point as well.
Yeah, so there's always massive context to it. I think that sometimes it gets lost. There's a kind of a narrative out there, or the way people talk about mental health is like, okay, what are their misbehaviors, or what are their symptoms? What's wrong with them? And then what diagnosis should they have because of that? Whereas we find that a lot of the meaning gets lost in that. So I guess it's really important to try and look at, like you're saying, Laura, the context and what might actually be going on for that young person that's informing why they might be behaving in the way they are, why they might be responding how they are.
Yeah. So will we move on to the bits and pieces?
So the framework is like a series of questions. So that's what we're going to look at. And what I think might be helpful for people watching or listening to this is to try and maybe use these questions in relation to whatever change your young person might be experiencing, and to see, okay, well, how does that impact on their mental health, and how does it help me to understand their mental health, and how might it also help them to understand what's going on for them. So this, the first question is, what has happened to them, or what has been done to them? And I find that a really useful place to start, because I think every time I'm working with a young person, or even a member of my own family, one of the first questions is, what's wrong? What's wrong with you? And it's really helpful to flip that on its head and say, actually, hold on a second, what's after happening to this person? Because we're kind of filled with this narrative that there's something internally wrong with someone for the way that they're acting, or the way that they're reacting to what's happening to them. When really, what's really informed it is that something big has happened to them in their lives, and this is a massive change for them. And to take that into context and try and get an understanding of it, I think that first question is really good.
Yeah, I suppose when we say what's wrong, it's sort of a label already before, and it's we have the context, or what's actually happened, and it's quite powerful to give someone that opportunity to explain it from their own perspective as to what's happened, as opposed to what's wrong with you, we see you're upset, what's that about, more so. Yeah.
So I think every parent probably at some point or another has turned around and at least thought, if not said out loud, what is wrong with you? And it's really helpful to just take a moment to take the step back and think, hold on a sec, there's nothing actually wrong with my young person. There's nothing wrong with me here either. This is something big that's happened. and to try and just get to the bones of that and try to see what's underneath.
Yeah.
So some of the changes, I guess, that we talked about, you know, what has happened to young people that's maybe hurt their well-being or had a negative impact on them. And some of the things that happen are like losing someone or moving school or losing jobs, you know, things like that we mentioned in that slide previous. And especially the idea that these things happen to a young person means that they have a lot less control over them. So things like the bodily changes that we mentioned, you know, young people don't have control over puberty or the massive changes in hormones that they're experiencing throughout adolescence. So having less control, that's another big thing that happens to young people that can have an impact then on their mental health.
Yeah, and I suppose in recent times there's been a lot of things that we haven't had a lot of control in. So that's adding extra to what might have been considered the norm previously. So there's a lot less control and a lot less uncertainty around what's happening and how is this all going to look in a week, a month, or 6 months.
100%. That's such a good point. Is like, oh, you know, there's so much that's out of our control in general, and for young people. And now in the last few months, there's so much more that's outside their control, and they're so restricted in what they and what we can do. And there's all these things that have.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go on, yeah.
Particularly though at an age when they're craving to develop their independence and to develop their skills and to show that they can do things, and a lot of that's been taken out of their control, taken out of all our controls, for positive reasons to keep us safe. But it's challenging for young people.
Okay, so then the next question is, so firstly, what's happened to them? And then secondly, how has it affected their emotions? And I even feel, I don't know about you, Laura, but I find it hard to even phrase it like what's happened to them or how did it affect their emotions, because these are things that are happening to all of us. And I think that's part of the point of using this framework this evening. Is it's a little bit different maybe to how some of the webinars have been phrased before, is that we're really trying to get to the nub of understanding the context and that these things are happening to all of us. They're affecting all of our mental health. They're affecting all of our emotions.
Yeah, to understand them and to accept them as sort of they are what they are. But sometimes we get caught up in trying to have the good sleep pattern and eat right, and we've set expectations for ourselves when actually when things have happened to us, it's going to affect our emotions. Well, yeah.
So in trying to think about that, when these things happen, so I guess one of the examples we might focus on a bit more this evening is that whole transition piece. So what's happened to you? You've had to move from primary to secondary, or what's happened to you? You've had to have the Leaving Cert cancelled or whatever. When we're thinking of how that might affect a young person's emotions, we might think, have they lost anything in that? So there's that obvious one of having to lose your graduation or lose your exams or that kind of thing. But also how it affects their emotions is a massive one that we see is in sense of identity. So again, if you go back to the primary to secondary school, you're this kind of big fish in a small pond in primary school. Everything is kind of looked after, and you know, like everything's a lot more straightforward. And then you go into this place where your confidence is immediately affected, your self-esteem, who you are is entirely changed, your sense of identity is entirely changed, even your peer group. So trying to think of the context of that and how, of course, that's going to have an impact on a young person's mental health then.
Yeah, 100%. There's so many things that change in that. What might be considered one transition, there's actually several within the one. It's not just a building, it's a whole the way of life, to the length of the day, to how the day is structured, to the people they meet. So different, and what's their identity within that as well. Making friends as well.
Yeah. I can just picture my own self even moving into secondary school and how daunting it was. It's a totally different life. And for some young people, whilst I'd say probably for most young people it's daunting regardless, for some young people it can just be that bit more challenging, especially if they find that their own sense of self is negatively affected.
Yeah. their confidence is affected, and maybe what they've heard in the past is bringing up stuff for them as what might happen or what the worries. And I suppose over the years, seeing like yourself, seeing a lot of young people come in with worries of what might be or what might happen, that are there, and that can be quite hard, and a lot of anxiety around that.
Yeah, so those are the worries that I think that when you start to get to secondary school, or again a big change moving to college, the worries even start to manifest, or the anxiety starts to, like, young people can be quick to convince themselves that, you know, there must be something wrong with them because they don't feel right, or they don't feel the same as their new group of peers, or they don't feel like they belong. So they're the kind of common emotional impacts that we see from those big changes.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose you see sleep is there, appetite, they're the sort of very visual things that you can see as someone maybe isn't sleeping as well, or they're avoiding certain things. And definitely see that on a more physical basis, when people are trying to adapt.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, and so then the next question we look at is, what sense or understanding do they make of it? And again, this is kind of getting right to the nub of what we're trying to talk about this evening, is trying to get an understanding of, okay, well, what is actually going on for this young person? It's not that there is something wrong with them. It's not that they're reacting in a negative, in a wrong way, which they often would label themselves even with. It's more trying to get an understanding of, okay, well, what is this saying? What are they saying about themselves, or what are they seeing in themselves based on what's after happening? So that's the next question, is what sense or understanding did you make of it?
Yeah, trying to figure out what or who they are within that, or what do they take from it. The kind of deeper level again to the emotion to get underneath.
Yeah. I feel it feels like it comes up all the time in sessions with young people, is this idea that they're so quick to take on self-blame and to feel that there's something wrong with them, that they're not doing life right, or that kind of thing. They get this understanding of themselves as unwelcome, having to put on a kind of a fake persona, not being able to be themselves, their true selves, or who they've wanted to be. And often young people come into us saying, I just want to be that happy young person that I was back in fourth or fifth class, when, you know, there wasn't this kind of weight of the world on my shoulders. And they can really find themselves losing that sense of who they are throughout that secondary school period. I don't know, do you see that as well, Laura?
Yeah, definitely, particularly the first 2 years, and it sort of can settle in by a lot of third and fourth years. I don't know if that's similar. They're trying to figure it out, and often that imposter syndrome, you see, well, what we say is imposter syndrome, that maybe they shouldn't be there, or that self-blame and the critical self, definitely happens. Yeah.
And even thinking back to some of the other big changes that we mentioned, I think lots of young people feel like imposters in their own body, or that their sense of who they are in their body is wrong as well. That it's, you know, that this isn't me, or even, you know, changes in loss in terms of losing close friends when they're going from primary to secondary, or losing that peer group as they kind of strive to find who they are, and realizing that maybe the peer group they're in isn't the one that was for them in the first place, or it feels like they're kind of trying to adjust to those things all the time, and trying to kind of make sense of who they are and what group they're in and where they're going.
Yeah. What does it mean for them in themselves, but also the wider view in a school context? How is that viewed for them in a school context within other peer groups? Yeah.
And when I was trying to think this through for parents, and what might be a helpful way of thinking about this, because it doesn't necessarily give you something to go and change with a young person, or it doesn't give you how you should be relating to your young person differently. but it might give you a starting point for a conversation with a young person, with your young person.
Yeah.
It's like, if you think yourself, what's happened to them? Okay, there's that big change that's happened. How's it affecting their emotion? Well, I can see that every day they're either feeling low or anxious or that kind of a thing. Their confidence is down. And then it's like, okay, well, what understanding can I make of it? What are they possibly thinking about themselves? What's this change? What effect has it had on them, their sense of themselves? And is that a helpful place for me to start to talk to them about? Because I think a parent or a good adult, what you're doing with a young person is sitting with them and taking them seriously, listening to them and trying to help them make sense of all of this. Because a lot of the time they're not making sense, or the sense they're making of it is one of self-blame, or again trying to be someone who they don't really feel is themselves.
Yeah, just helping them to pull their thoughts together to support them and allow them to facilitate that for young people and that connection, and often that they're able to tell you. It's just the facilitating of it and trying to understand it and help them to understand it themselves can be really beneficial. But it takes time.
Yeah, it takes time to take the time to sit next to them and to be willing to go on that journey with them as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so the next question then, and it might sound a little unusual or a bit drastic, but this is really the way we'd like to get you to start thinking about it is, what did you have to do to survive? So again, it's instead of what are the symptoms, it's more like how has this young person responded in order to cope with what is going on for them. So yeah, we kind of thought of a few of these that I think, again, they get labeled as symptoms, or they get labeled as misbehaviors or things that are wrong with young people at times. But if you look under the surface, you can see that actually a lot of them have very understandable functions. So things like sometimes feeling low is actually a really helpful way of not feeling overwhelmed. And sometimes feeling anxious is a really helpful way for protecting a young person from danger, or from losing friends, or from, being betrayed like they may have been in their experience of the transition.
Yeah, and we often see that coming through, that the behaviour often brings a young person maybe to Jigsaw, the anger, as it were, and it's disguised that as some other vulnerability, and that when you try to help them make sense of, you can kind of get under that. But it's the anger is their ability to cope to protect themselves, and when they feel under threat.
But that's it. I think anger is such a good example of, say you're seeing your young person being a lot more angry of late, say following either a move to secondary school, or a loss of a loved one, or even a loss of the kind of family system with separated parents or something like that. And we would get that referral come in as anger management, or this young person needs to control their anger. Whereas really, if you think of the questions, what's happened to them? They've lost a massive relationship, or they've had to have that big change happen. How's it affected their emotions? Okay, well, they've become angry. And then what's our understanding of it is okay, well, actually, maybe that they've lost a lot of control in that, and lots of things have happened to them that they haven't been able to do anything about. So in order to survive, they've become angry and they've become aggressive, just so they can get any level of sense of control, any level of, okay, I have to do this thing for myself. I have to be able to have some level of independence.
To form some form of an identity sometime as well. If other ones have been lost due to circumstances out of their control.
Yeah. And that's that identity piece again is another important one, because they may have spent their whole entire life up until this point being the good boy or the good girl, and they're finally actually trying to stick up for themselves, and they get labeled with acting out. That's the kind of ironic piece, is like they're actually trying to get a bit of control in their life. They're trying to stick up for themselves, but it's seen as a misbehavior, or it's seen as, again, something wrong with them.
Yeah.
So the next question then, and this is where maybe we can get into a bit more of the practical side of things, is looking at what a young person's strengths are. I think a big part of that is that oftentimes young people don't see any of those.
100%. It's actually one of the least liked questions when we do our first assessment with a young person. We ask them what's going well, or what do you do that's good or has helped you through this difficult period. And sometimes a lot of times we're met with silence. I'm sure you're the same, Cian. That it takes a bit of digging and a bit of, what about, you've been through that, what got you through that, and that skill and the skills and the qualities and the resilience really that all young people have, and it's through their stories that we hear it, and it's helping them to transform it for themselves, to see it in a skill or a quality or a strength that they have. Definitely.
Absolutely. Sometimes that can be, so we see young people for 8 sessions, and sometimes that can be the core of the 8 sessions is trying to find anything that we can reflect back to the young person that they might be able to internalize as a positive strength.
To believe it.
Exactly, yeah, because it has to be genuine. There's no point in kind of tokenistically saying, "Oh, I'm nice." That's a kind of an easy way to answer the question so that you get the clinician off your back almost. So that I like to ask you, if I have a parent in for the first session, the kind of last question I'll ask is, what's your favorite thing about your young person? Because I think oftentimes we don't give ourselves the opportunity to say those things to our young people. And it can be the kind of one time it's kind of the one time in that first session where a big emotion comes into the room, because the parent is finally allowed to or given permission to say all the things that they really value in that young person.
Can be so powerful, that piece in that safe space. And I suppose now maybe it's harder to do that, and for parents might be creating those spaces that are safe for them and the young person, or a one good adult, or facilitating that for the young person. So powerful.
And oftentimes it is that one good adult is the strong thing that they have in their lives, as someone who will be there for them and listen to them. And I think the trick, or the bit not to try and not get caught up in, is that the strength has to be a doing thing. That it has to be, oh, they're really smart, or they're really good at their homework, or they're always very obedient around the house. It's trying to find what you value about them just for being them, that intrinsic value of the real you, or what it is about your relationship with them that you really love, or that you see as a strength, or what is it about them that's unique. So it doesn't have to be a doing thing, which I think we all get very caught up in, is the achievements and the doing bits, where really sometimes it's about, well, they're really relatable, or they have a good sense of humor, or they're nice to be around. Those are the things that I would be trying to cite a bit more as a strength.
Definitely, there's huge meaning in that. It's a quality, more so than a skill that they've learned. It's something that belongs to them, which is so powerful, and it's that intrinsic part of them, as you talked about. Definitely.
And they're the resources that you can call upon then when a big change happens in their lives, and you see that their mental health has been impacted on as a result. Then you can go back and say, remember these things about you. These are the things that have gotten you through a challenge before. Let's see what of these might be helpful now. And even if a young person can't click with that, or they don't identify that with that, it's about you continuing to be that strength, and being there with them through it, and sitting there with them in it. Again, It's not about problem solving, which I know a lot of young people can get irritated by. It's more just being a witness and being with them.
I know a supervisor of mine once said that we hold the hope for young people. We hold that candle through times that are maybe turbulent. We're like a lighthouse, just keep holding that light through the storm. And for me, it really sat with me through all the young people I've met, that even on maybe you feel that it's really hard or you're working really hard with them and you feel you're not getting much, that it's you are the light. You'll never, sometimes you might never know what you've done, but it's that hope that they have, because you know they have it in them, and it's holding that can help get them there.
That's where you can be the strength or bring the strength with them.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say at this point, just a reminder that you can send in questions at any time if we do have questions. I know I don't always remember to say that or whatever. But, so then again, a kind of a summary of the framework as a means for understanding your young person and what's going on for them. It's a simple enough series of questions, but it can really get you deep down into the context and the understanding of what's going on for a young person. What has happened to them? How is it affecting them? What sense have they made of it? What are they doing, or what have they had to do to survive? And what are the strengths that you can see or that they may be able to draw on to get through the big change in their lives? So again, just a kind of a review. I think one of the big changes that we've talked about is that transition from primary to secondary. It also, the same kind of thing applies from secondary to third level. The idea that this big change has happened, it's affected me by, I've become a bit low or a bit anxious or that kind of thing. What sense have I made of it? Maybe I've started to think that there's something wrong with me, or that I don't fit in. What have I had to do to survive? Maybe I've isolated myself in my room, or maybe I've become a bit more angry. And it's trying to get to the reasons for why I might be doing those things and how they've actually helped me. And then what are my strengths to get through that? And a lot of the times they're the things that we've been drawing on to in the past when challenging things have come up. And they're those kind of intrinsic values that you might see in your young person. And the hope then is that in seeing all of those and in piecing those together and getting that context, that you come out the other end with a real story for a young person, one that they can connect with and that gives them a bit more understanding.
Yeah, I think it puts it all together and gives a bit of a structure to what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay, so then the next slide, Laura, you were looking at a few more practical things, maybe?
Yeah, we were just thinking about, we know people like to get some practical ideas, and I suppose it's just helping to tie into that story piece and supporting them, considering their strengths, and just some of the main ones would be that planning, preparing and pacing any changes, and considering maybe what has happened to them before, and preparing them for maybe changes that's come along. And pacing is really important, and managing expectations as well. So when we're thinking about maybe going to secondary school, how do you support and work with your young person to support them to transition into secondary school and pace that? So, you know, even things to sleep routine, to diet, to even starting the conversation at an early point around going back to school and their fears and their worries, and working with them and through those conversations that we've talked about. Prioritize mental and physical health. Can't stress that enough. We're singing it at the minute, through all our conversations with young people and parents, that it's so important to stay on top of that, particularly during times of change. And I know it's one thing that often I can let go, going for the walk or going for the run when things are busy or trying to adjust, and maybe we just want to sit down and take the easy option, but it's so beneficial and valuable to tend to the mental and physical health, and that comes into the self-care piece and that promotion of self-care too, and supporting young people to take time for themselves and allow them in a way to.
I think that both of those points are really good in terms of prevention. I think that's the bit that sometimes we can miss is that there's actually lots of things that we can do to prevent further difficulties down the line. So it's that whole your mental health is like your dental health, and the things that we can do to look after ourselves when we see a big change approaching.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and the other ones we've kind of talked through around that one good adult and the talk and connect to young people, just taking that time and kind of carving it out, because it does take time and it might not all happen in one conversation. It's a sort of a long it's a long endurance to get there, but through time and patience to get there, definitely. I know there's a lot of this has been covered in previous webinars, so we didn't want to repeat everything, so you can catch up on that on the YouTube channel, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, lots of the things that you're mentioning, and people will see them in the other videos, but it's about prioritization as well, isn't it? I think sometimes people talk about not having the time.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm always like, okay, well, is it that you don't have the time, or is it that you don't prioritize the time to do those things for yourself and to be there with your young person in those things?
Yeah, definitely. It's hard to prioritize when there's so much going on. It's really important.
So there's a couple of questions I think that have been coming through. We're just going to leave the last slide up there in terms of just reminders about Jigsaw and the support and information that's available. And again, we've been told just to remind you at the end of the presentation to fill out the satisfaction questionnaire as well. So I'm asking you the question that I've got. Is that right, Laura?
Well, we can ask one and we can chat through it. I can find it hard to see mine, but
Okay.
yeah, go for it.
Okay, well I can read out the one that I've gotten then. It's about a son who's 14 who's been through a huge trauma in the last year, and as a result has had to change school, resulting in loss of friends. He's put up a wall and taken on a hard man persona, and as a result his behavior in school, which is a little disruptive and distracting, is getting him into trouble, to the point where he's on a behavior report card, and that school are finding it are refusing to see the bigger picture and not engaging as regards his well-being. And then there's a fear that his experience of school in general is going to be a negative one. So that's really in line, I think, with some of the big changes that we've been talking about, because if he's 14, he's only just changed school in the first place as well, and now had to change school again. And to have had experienced a big trauma like that, of course, that's going to have a big, massive impact on his mental health as well.
And the anger is that protection, as we chatted about, that control piece is something that he's become to know that keeps him safe. And then what might those other, if he was met with compassion, how might he manage that? Might be very different.
Because when you think of a trauma is usually something that's happened to a young person. So I imagine that's something that's been out of his control.
Yeah.
So like you said, then the anger is a way of getting some level of control back. But it's so difficult, I have found, when communicating with schools around that whole kind of understanding and context. Sometimes it can be really difficult when there's always so many people in a young person's year or so many people in that school, and they're trying to look after the academic side of things, to realize that a trauma that they may have experienced has had such an impact on that level of anger or that kind of behavior. So that can be really difficult.
Yeah, definitely. It can be. Schools have a lot of stuff going on, and it can be hard to communicate that with them, the effect of the trauma for the young person. I think as a parent, it's being one good adult in a way, and supporting the young person to have their voice, even though it can be challenging, and maybe it's getting other supports in the community as well for that young person that might help with that communication, be that through family support networks or various community groups that maybe can help with that too, or indeed their counselling or therapist as well.
Yeah, it would be important to get some support in relation to the trauma for sure. You would think for the young person to have some kind of an opportunity to gain some understanding of what's happened to them. And I'm just thinking in terms of that fear of school, the school experience forever going to be a negative one. That like I wouldn't want to sugarcoat around that, whether school does become a kind of a place of friction for him. One thing I do often have to bring up with parents at times is that school isn't the be all and end all either. So if a school isn't being 100% understanding or they're not taking the context into account, it's not the important thing is not to reflect that back into the young person. So not to emphasize that message that they might be getting that there's something wrong with them. It's not to mollycoddle them either. So obviously you have to be you have to have boundaries in place with the young person and limits when it comes to behavior, but really not reflecting back that message that they might be getting that there's something wrong with them or that they're bold or something like that. And it's understanding that that anger may be there as a real need for some level of self-control or some level of control of their life or their environment.
And that importance of highlighting their strengths as well. And maybe it's not through school, it's through other means and working with that young person, because in school maybe all they feel they're hearing is negative and they're negative, and anger again is the protection. But offering that space where they can show their strengths outside of school and they can get praise and see that sense of achievement, that the value that they have in the world and with the people that they love.
I'm sure when you say anger really is a big form of energy as well. So when you're looking at strengths, that could be a big one for sport or projects or whatever they might be into, whether it's mechanics or whatever. Is using that anger as fuel as a strength to really throw themselves into the things that they are passionate about.
Definitely. I have a wee question here, Cian. When we move on to it, any practical advice to support your young person transition into secondary school given the COVID situation?
Yeah. I'd say that's a commonly held question. That's the first thing that comes to mind for me is addressing it in the first instance is actually really sitting down with the young person and talking it through. I think that trying to avoid it or sweep it under the rug is something that maybe they'll just be fine with. You're probably only asking for problems down the line. So I would always say to a parent that the first port of contact is to sit with them, talk it through with them, and acknowledge even your own anxieties about that, because we're all finding this a really strange situation. And pretending that we're machines and aren't affected by it only kind of leads to the young person also feeling like, again, oh sugar, maybe I'm doing something wrong because I'm finding this difficult, whereas mom or dad are totally fine with it all.
Yeah, and on a practical level is acknowledging the ending might be helpful. I'm working with some leaving certs who are finishing up not in the way they expected, and we've kind of chatted how do they end it for themselves, and I think something similar is the case for younger age. How do they end it in their own way? So some people write a letter to their teacher, and other people are looking back on photographs to sort of kind of signify the end, which can be quite important. And then it's still connecting, particularly for the primary school. I know that the teachers are still working to connect with the teachers and what maybe there's material they would have covered to prepare young people of a normal situation to support you as a parent in that time too, in the transition.
Yeah, I'm kind of always struck by that balance between really hating the situation that we're in because of all that it's taken from us and because of all of those kind of endings that we're missing out on. and then also being thankful that we're in an age where we have the technology to do
Yeah.
some of these things. So it's not the same, but having an ending ceremony via Zoom is better than having none at all.
Yeah.
So there's lots of ways that people are getting creative, and to get creative about how you can consolidate that ending or mark the ending, because endings are so important, and having a way to do that a young person feels like, okay, at least I've marked it in some way, can be really meaningful for them.
It's that end point for them, yeah, definitely. And that what we talked about, the plan, pace, and prepare. So that's supporting the adaptation of the young person early on, and starting to talk about the changes of moving to secondary school and what might be different, and any questions or fears or wonderings or worries they may have, to start that conversation early, and work at it throughout the summer.
Absolutely, that's the prevention piece for sure. So I have another question. Is my daughter is losing out on the rite of passage to secondary school. The group context where they talk about what we used to call sex ed won't happen. I'm trying to separate out my anxiety from hers. I really feel for her the confusion and uncertainty about the future. So the rite of passage to secondary school, do you know what that might be referring to?
Maybe it's the sort of the norms of finishing primary school and the preparation to move into secondary school. I know they would probably cover, I actually have one of my best friends is a sixth class teacher, so she's actually missing a lot of her completing those sex ed and a lot of those sort of very formative things that can be left to the last minute. And I suppose particularly primary school, they're missing maybe 4 months of teaching. And for sixth class, there's often a lot of value in that, and she's finding that hard as a teacher, to communicate that with parents and with young people as well, so it can somewhat understand what that parent is speaking about. And maybe sex ed wasn't one thing that was covered, or there's other very important pieces that prepare young people for that transition to secondary school.
Yeah, and when it comes to sex ed as well, I think it's so important. Again, I feel like I'm kind of banging the same tune, but it's about sitting down with the young person and really being forthright and talking it all through with them.
Yeah.
Because if they're not going to get it in school, then really you're the parent is the only person who's going to get to talk about what respect is and what respect for themselves is, and what realistic sexual experiences are. So it'd be really encouraging that parent to sit with the young person and talk that through, on a kind of a one-to-one. And then this idea of trying to separate out my anxiety from hers. I'm just gonna signpost to a couple of really good podcasts on that. Actually, is Dr. Shefali. I don't know if you've heard of her, but she was on the Oprah Super Soul Sundays only recently enough. And it's all about parents trying to separate their own identities and their own emotions from that of their young person. So I don't know. I think I can write a message to the group. Maybe not. Maybe I'll send it to the spelling to Rebecca, and she can pass it on with Dr. Shefali. That's Super Soul Sundays. Yeah, I'd really recommend it. It'd blow your mind.
I think self-care is for one good adults, parents, whoever that is, and minding yourself is so important, and to remember that in the midst of all of this stuff that's going on, the whole put it on your own mask before you put on your young person, or your child. So there's certainly a lot of value in that at this time as well.
Because I think we're all experiencing levels of anxiety, aren't we? So it's important to acknowledge that as well.
Yeah. Now, how do I balance compassion and discipline when managing change with my children? I separated from my husband 7 months ago, and my children go from anger, disobedience to upset. Thank you. Yeah.
It's so hard.
Yeah, very hard. There's a lot of change and transitions and challenges in identity for that parent, but also for the young people there as well. And the emotions that you've kind of described aren't surprising. For maybe that's how the young people are trying to make sense of it and to cope during this challenging time as well. But can be hard to maybe to keep the discipline and the boundaries within all that too.
Yeah, it's the first question that comes up for me, even when I'm going through the questions that we were looking through earlier, the framework is how do you strike the balance between being understanding of a young person and where they're at, but also introducing a level of boundaries and discipline. I would look at having some level of limits as to what's acceptable and what's not, and maybe some rules in the house as well. Things like it's okay to be sad, it's so okay to be angry. I'm here with you, and I really want to hear those things and sit with you in them. But we don't hurt each other in this house, or we don't whatever the rule might be that they're breaking, we don't call each other those names in this house, those kinds of general rules that a parent would also abide by as well, so that again the young person isn't being told you're wrong, you're misbehaving. These are rules that we should all be living up to in the house. I find that those are kind of helpful ways to bridge that gap between discipline and compassion.
When both parties are taking them on board and acting in the way that's agreed and that sort of contract nearly setting them together and the conversation around it. Maybe in arguments it's returning to it when the things have settled and discussing it out and understanding for each other, what has happened and how are we sort of coping during this, what was that and what was that about, to understand it, and then that can create change as well.
Because your young person will appreciate that kind of a discussion then afterwards. It's hard to do in the heat of the moment, but when they see that, okay, well, at least you're taking the time to try and understand where I'm coming from. Okay, I have another question here is, our 14-year-old's daughter has autism and learning disabilities. She suffers from anxiety in all walks of her life, but especially in school, or when she went to separate from us, her mum and dad. Have you any advice on how to deal with separation anxiety? Thank you. I hope it's not off the topic. No, it's not off the topic. I guess those are changes that she would have to experience as well, is separating from her parents, and that's a big change from, especially I guess come September when you'll have had so much time together. I think it's a big adjustment that we'll all be experiencing. There's some level of separation anxiety, or if that's what the term to use. But the idea of, again, having to adjust whether someone has autism or learning disabilities or not, it's a big adjustment having to become independent from your parents. So dealing with that, you're trying to, there's different things that you can do to once you, it sounds like you're on that first step of understanding. So what's happened to your daughter is that they're having to separate from their parents. How is it affecting them? They're experiencing anxiety and they're finding it to be a scary experience. And then what is it saying about them then? You're trying to figure out, well, what is so scary about that? And what strengths can you draw upon that will help you through the challenge? So again, if one of the strengths that you have is you as the one good adult is trying to come up with maybe some sort of a transitional piece, I think that's what we'd usually go to, even if it's like a letter to give them going to the school, or bringing them to the school gate the first time, trying to take it in a graded way so that they have that strength of you in mind throughout the day. Do other ones come to mind for you, Laura?
Well, I suppose in terms of anxiety, that sort of, you kind of touched on it there, the sensory piece that goes with that, and at home and then through school, and maybe that can be quite calming, particularly if that your young person has other challenges. So considering smells and visual images and touch and all the rest of the sensory stuff that is often we forget with anxiety, but it can be really powerful to comfort and to support someone to get through it.
And that feeds really well with those kind of that idea of transitional objects, is if there is a certain smell or touch or feel or taste that they really value about home, or that really brings them home and gives them that sense of safety, is can you get creative about bringing something to school with them that reminds them of that, that keeps them in that kind of home safety kind of sensory field as well.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who use the same washing powder on the school jumper.
Okay.
That can be really helpful, or maybe there's a certain thing in the back of a journal or a written sentence that can be quite calming. For, I suppose, that sensory thing, I would promote it quite a bit. Which I think is really helpful.
To the stepping stones to take to kind of adjust to that change then.
Yeah, and that planning and pacing, as you mentioned, Key, and that grading the expectations and working together through them and setting the goals, and little by little achieving them together, and thinking of what resources might you and the young person need to support the achievement of that goal. Be that school might need to come in and help out a wee bit too, or might be the lady in the canteen helps out in whatever way they can do it, or various different resources that are around to get support in that.
Yeah, it can often be really helpful to write out that big list of strengths or resources that you can draw upon, and get creative about, okay, well, how can I bring that into the whole transition to school for my young person?
Yeah. I have one more question. Will we do one more? We're at 9 o'clock.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so daughter 15 with anxiety and low self-esteem, missed lots of second year, saw CAMHS but finished now. She doesn't feel she got any ideas to help her deal with anxiety, just deep breathing, which doesn't help her. They were more interested in getting her back to school rather than personally. I don't know what advice to be given her to help her. Her anxiety is down by 50% by being at home, but there is still some there at home. Any suggestions? Yeah.
Again, and I'm sure lots of teachers or parents would shoot me for this being my first go-to, but the back of my mind, it's always there, so I might as well say it, bring it to the forefront, is school isn't the only answer. And once you put that on the table, once you leave that out there as an option, you'd be surprised at how many solutions can come to mind then. So I'd always say things like, well, do they have to go to school? What's so important about school that has to be the answer to what's going on here? And even the young person themselves then will often turn around and say, well, I know I don't have to, but actually I want to go to school more than the anxiety or the bad feeling I'm having is stopping me from going. And so that's when you can at least get to grounds for developing solutions then. Or at the same time, it can end up being something that school, that whole 9 to 4:30 day, is just not for them, and it's about figuring out a different way for their educational structure too.
Definitely, yeah. And that piece of trying to understand, I suppose it mentioned that she's done maybe some of the deep breathing pieces, which can be, people, it can be beneficial as a quick thing, but for others it's kind of getting to understand the anxiety. Where does it originate from, or how does it present for them, and to support them for young people to come up with their own solutions with that can be so much more successful than us giving the answers to them, because there's internal motivation. So supporting them to come up with that.
Because if the whole direction to date has been, okay, give them relaxation, give them things to deal with anxiety, just get them back to school, then that's really not checking in with, okay, well, what's actually going on for them? What's happened to this young person that has impacted on their emotions in a way that's made them anxious? And what is it about school in particular that is giving them that understanding that it's a not a safe place to be? And so really trying to get to the core of what might be going on for them then, and why it is so unsafe for them, and what it is that they feel that they need to avoid school altogether in order to survive this level of anxiety. Trying to really get deep into what the story is for that young person, what that narrative they're telling themselves is, or how they see themselves.
Definitely will. It's a very different way of approaching it, but it sounds like she does well at home, and so there's certainly something there with school, but maybe now's the time to figure out why is it working at home and what's working at home, because if going back to school, maybe there's something in what's happening at home and adapting that maybe for school, or maybe it's not school, maybe it's some other setting to get education and that adaptation. So we've learned a lot about ourselves and how we manage our emotions over the past 6 months, and we've had to do it very quickly. And something that we're going to get over the next year, 2 years, is what have we learned from this experience, this massive worldwide experience? What have we learned for ourselves, as our families, our societies? And it can be quite transformational too.
Yeah, what's worth prioritizing? Where do our real values lie? Yeah.
What needs to be done and what do we want to get done?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Niall. That's all my questions, I think.
Yeah. Me too. Okay, great. I hope you found that somewhat beneficial, or maybe a little bit different. It was lovely chatting to you, Laura, through it all.
You too, Cian.
Okay, so I think the one last reminder to fill in that survey, I think, after this when this closes.
Yeah, we do look at them, and we really appreciate when people fill them out, because we can make changes to try to improve the experience for parents, and you guys are the ones who've experienced this, so we really feel what sense did you make of it, and what have you learned, so we can bring that forward. Thank you.
Super. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.